Hi everyone, Asmo here, and if you like me had a terrible league start or you're just starting late and want a strategy to make very consistent currency early on, I have a very simple strat that works well. My league start was literally unplayable. Servers crashing, instances disappearing, rollbacks cancelling my progress, so because of that I decided to abandon my earlier plans and just take a break for a couple of days until the game is more playable. I decided I'm going to reroll with the goal of making a character that can tackle Blight Ravaged maps at the lowest level I can, and I managed to do it on a 5 link at level 69 with low level gems. And by the time I finished that map, I was of course 3 levels higher already, but the strategy is basically as follows. First, you want to pick a build that can do the Blight Ravaged map. So what kind of a build is that? That is definitely something that can deal with proxy shields and leverage corpse life for damage, because Blight Ravaged maps are area level 85, so corpses there are also area level of 85, and these monsters have a ton of life, so exploding them or using their corpses for damage with something like DD or cremation and so on is going to be the best way to get damage on low levels of gear and low levels of gems. So that's what I did exactly, and I went with cremation of exhuming poison. The reason why we're playing poison is because I think it's a little bit better than ignite and ignite explosion and proliferation, because we can stack multiple poisons from the same explosion on one target and then they can also proliferate. So that's why we're playing Pathfinder, because it allows us to spread all of these poisons, and then if the monsters are surrounding one big boss, which is generally what has the most HP in Blight Ravaged maps, is the big bosses that have like insane amounts of life, like millions and millions of lives, like multiple shapers worth of life. You need lots of single target damage for that. So exploding corpses and spreading the poison also from these monsters dying on top of that boss is what allows us to get a lot of damage and deal with these. So that is the build choice and the justification. You basically need something that's high single target damage and can go through proxy shields, and ideally has like explode and proliferation to chain kill monsters that are basically walking in these straight lines next to each other, because it's a perfect environment for that. So things that utilize Asena's Gentle Touch, things that utilize corpses, things like that are really, really good. So the first part of the strategy was to level the character. So you basically go through the campaign. Poison's Concoction is the perfect leveling setup for this. Very, very quickly and easily you can level with that, and that's exactly what I did. And then you can do some heist from level 60. From level 60 to level 67, I recommend doing some heist, getting the currency to get the first early uniques so that you can transition into the builds, get your cremation of exhuming, get all of your gems that you're going to be using, check POB and level them in the offhand. And then after that, you can do some Merc Lab to get even more levels of the gems. Particularly, you want levels for Desecrate, because the higher the level of Desecrate, the higher the level of the corpses that you're spawning with it, and that's going to help your damage when you don't have other monsters that you're exploding that can grant you that damage. You have to spawn your own corpses, so you need Desecrate to be as high level as possible. Cremation of exhuming, the level of that actually is not as important, but the Desecrate level is really important, which is why I also have an Empower here by now. At the beginning I did not have the Empower, and also plus 2 to levels. I also did not have that early on when I started at level 69. So that is something that you can definitely do to leverage Desecrate even higher. So you do the heist, then you do some Merc Lab, and you get your currency, you get your gems, you get your gem levels, and that should already set you up to the point where even if you're doing it at the league start, there will be some blighted maps. You can either do blighted maps or you can do expedition logbooks. Expedition logbooks are also really good for this build. It's going to be perfect for that. With these flasks recovering our life and automatically going off, the build is actually surprisingly tanky. Right after doing that Blight Ravaged map, I also went into a T16 map, because I dropped some T16 maps. So I went into a T16 to see how that would work, and it worked perfectly well. The only problem was like low single target damage at the boss at the end, when there was no more corpses to detonate, right? And I had to only spawn my corpses, and my Desecrate was still low level. But other than that, the character is really tanky and can still handle Atlas progression very, very well if you don't mind the clunky playstyle, right? Because this playstyle is not really designed for mapping. If you wanted to map, then you could probably stick with the Poison's Concoction or some other skill that will have a much better clear, because this is definitely not a good clear. This is a very stationary skill. I can show you how that works. It's basically spawn some corpses, or there are corpses already there, and then you put the cremation, and then you just keep chucking corpses into it, and it keeps detonating them as every, like, whenever a projectile is launched, a corpse is detonated if there's a corpse around, right? So that's how the skill works. And you can see it lasts a while, right? It's still there. So you can drop it inside of a proxy shield when there is like a boss surrounded by monsters, drop a few corpses there and just leave, right? And that's gonna do its thing, and you can start taking care of the towers, right? And do it that way. So the progression, as I said, Heist, Merc Lab, then you can do either logbooks or lower tier blighted maps, because that's what would be available. But if there are Blight Ravaged maps available and you have this setup already, then you can just go straight into Blight Ravaged maps. But I would advise getting the enchant, of course, with the chilling towers freeze enemies for 0.2 seconds. So Blight on its own, you can find different content creators that tell you about it, and I might do video about like Blight Ravaged maps later on as well. But this video will try to focus on the strategy approaching that, and not like how to do the Blight Ravaged maps themselves, right? That's going to be something you can find on your own, or I'll make a next video about it if people ask in the comments below. But what do you actually farm from these Blight Ravaged maps? So the cool thing about it is that you get lots of maps. So even though my Atlas progression, of course, I haven't done it. I just got a couple of maps completed from Blight Ravaged maps, couple of maps completed because I wanted some recipes for crafting. And other than that, I didn't really do my Atlas. But if you look at my map tab, I have a bunch of T16s, T15s, T14s. I have almost every single map I will need to progress my Atlas. And that is simply dropping from just natural map drops in the Blight Ravaged maps. So you're gonna fill in your Atlas. You're not gonna have to trade. You're not gonna have to search for maps. You're not gonna have to worry about map sustain. You're just gonna get a ton of maps from just doing these Blight Ravaged maps, and that's one of the things you're getting. What also you're getting, which is super valuable early on, is bases. You're getting flasks. You're getting tinctures that are level 86 and 85, because you from the explosion you get like 86, and from chests you get 85. So you get very high level items such as these flasks, which sell for like 9 chaos. I sold like a divine worth of these flasks. You can craft them as well after you finish with your Blight Ravaged maps after a few days, which is also really, really good profit. You also get tons of bases. So you get bases like Royal Plates, right? You get Lich Circlet, Syndicate Garb, all of these like tier 1, the highest tier bases. You get them level 86, and you get a bunch of them that are also like either higher quality or are also a very high percentage base, right? So like 100% base Sacred Chainmail, if this is like 86, 100%, right? That is something that people are going to be looking for, and it's just going to be like 5 chaos, 10 chaos, 5 chaos, 10 chaos. It just adds up over and over. Of course, you're getting a ton of oils, you're getting a ton of fragments, you're getting a ton of scarabs, you're getting all kinds of loot. So it's something that definitely I would recommend selling in bulk, because you're going to be getting lots of things like, okay, you get stacked decks. You don't want to sell when you have like 10 stacked decks, right? You want to sell where you have like hundreds of them, and you want to sell them for divines. So lots of these small things really, really add up. You're also getting, of course, raw divines and things like that. And this is a very, very consistent profit. Even if you don't get lucky, just consistently, you're always going to make your money back. It's basically impossible to lose money on that. And you're always going to be making consistent profit. You're going to be getting good XP. You're going to be building up your map pool. And you're basically going to be having a very, very smooth map progression afterwards, because you're going to have all the money that you want for your character. And you're not going to have to worry about that. You don't need to like look for different ways of like pushing and progressing content that is too difficult for you, because this is literally just like your skill in doing Blight Ravaged maps and knowing where to put the towers, knowing what anoints to use, and that's it. And you can just do them on very, very minimal gear, because after this character did it on level 69, the first map was the hardest, and then it just becomes easier and easier and easier, because we just get more and more damage as my gems level. I still don't even have level 20 gems, right? I still have level 18, 19 gems everywhere, and I'm destroying these maps. So let's talk about the character maybe. Just to give you like an idea, I'll talk first about the gems, then I'll talk about the gear, and then I'll talk about the passives, mentioning the most important things that we're using. As you can see, no Uber Lab, no nothing. I straight up went from level 69 from the campaign straight into Blight Ravaged maps, and that's what I've been doing on this character. So one thing that I want you to disregard on this character that I have is the Icefang Orbit. I was testing it because I found a really cool one for very cheap, but I think this is actually bad for the build, because this makes you shatter enemies when you kill them with hits, such as with explosions. And that will actually stop you from having corpses to detonate anymore, right? So that is actually a negative thing for our build. So I think you should not use the Icefang Orbit. So just skip that item. I was simply testing it, and pay attention to all the other items. So Consuming Dark converts our fire damage to chaos. So 2 of them, that's going to be 60% damage converted. And then that chaos damage will have 100% chance to poison enemies because it's 60 here and 60 here. But I think this is actually, not this, as far as I know, this doesn't actually stack, right? This is actually like of being overridden or overriding the poison chance, as far as I know. POB is very weird about this because for some reason POB shows Cospri's Will as having this like insane damage boost. It gives you like 70% DPS, even if you discount the extra curse, right? If you discount the extra curse and select things like Whispers of Doom already or whatever, right, on your passive tree, the Cospri's Will still, the poison chance gives you huge amount of damage, right? So I think this might work like that the Consuming Dark is actually a straight up like flat 60%, not scaling, not adding, not multiplying, and this gives you on top of that also always poison, right? So 100% chance to poison with your chaos and physical damage. Of course, this will not make you poison with the fire damage, so that is also important to note. But there is also another reason to use this chest. Number 1, it's very cheap. Number 2, extra curse, so that's 4 passive points for free. Number 3, affecting hexproof enemies. So on the maps that where you roll hexproof, or if a monster rolls hexproof, you can still affect them, and that will multiply your damage by a huge amount because we're using 2 curses, right? We're using Despair, which we have here with the setup with Arcanist Brand, and we're using the temporal change. So 2 curses, huge amount of damage, very, very important. Plus huge amount of evasion, plus huge amount of chaos res. So this is a very, very good early chest for this build just in general, right? Even if the POB numbers are like lying and it's just like a glitch in POB or something, or I don't understand it, it is still a good chest to use considering that it's, especially if it's like 5 chaos right now, right? So I would still use that. So that's the weapon and the chest. Then for the other items, I have the Elvor. I found one for like 30 chaos with +2 to socketed duration gems, so I got that to get the higher levels of Desecrate. So that is really nice because it allows us to cap the suppression. You need 25% suppression roll and 14% on boots in order to cap suppression with this tree. So you get exactly 100% suppression, 110 with this node because this is like on full life, but we don't care about on full life, right? That on full life, it doesn't matter. We're not gonna die from full life usually. So that's that item. Very, very nice. We're also recovering life whenever we suppress spell damage, and we're recovering energy shield whenever we're suppressing spell damage. So you're getting hit often by these like barrages in Blight, and this can save you from some of that, right? So the character can be actually quite tanky considering we don't have that much defense otherwise. Then we have simply just attributes and resistances on our jewelry. So we have this belt as well that has reduced flask charges used. I highly recommend getting 20% reduced flask charges used instead of like 30 or whatever percent increased charges gained, because this will actually benefit the charges that you're gaining from when you're getting hit by enemy a little bit better, right? So this will make it so that we're spending fewer charges and we're able to use the flasks more often that way in order to benefit from this healing, right? Recover 4% of life when you use a flask from the flask mastery. So really good to have a belt with either the reduced flask charges used or even increased flask charges gained. So both are fine. I prefer this one personally. Then we have the Asena's Gentle Touch. This allows us to have the extra source of explode, and because we are using the Cospri's Will and we have basically 100% chance to poison on hit if the explosion is a hit. So if there is a cursed monster, right, which can happen from either our Arcanist Brand Despair or just on hit from the Asena's Gentle Touch, something doesn't die from the first hit, it's gonna be cursed, and then on the second hit it's gonna be poisoned from the explosion, and then when it dies, that poison is also gonna proliferate to the next monster, right? So that's a very, very nice combo. This pair of gloves is basically turning any build into something that is much better at Blight, right? This is like, if you want to do Blight comfortably and you have a build that can benefit from this, very, very good item for that specifically. On boots, I just have suppression and some resistances and life, crafted movement speed. Movement speed is actually not very important. We're just getting around with Frostblink and Whirling Blades. We don't have to do that much moving because we're doing Blight Ravaged maps. And then the flasks are very, very important. So I haven't found a great and elegant solution to the mana flask because even with Eldritch Battery, the mana cost is so high when we're spamming the Desecrate that it actually still is not enough, right? So I need to be running the mana flasks for now, but this is like a very, very low budget setup to like farm Blight Ravaged maps on minimum currency, so I think it's completely fine to use the mana flask. So I just recommend Enduring Mana Flask, and it will last like 8 seconds or something, right, with the extra like flask duration that we have from other sources. Then we have the 3 elemental flasks. So we have the Sapphire, Topaz, and Ruby, and whatever suffixes you get on them is fine, but the prefix is gain 3 charges when you're hit by the enemy. So that in combination with used when charges reach full makes it so that we get constantly spam healed by them, right? Because they constantly get used, you generate lots of flask charges from the kills, plus you're getting hit sometimes, and whenever we're getting hit, we're getting healed as well. I chose to also run the Granite Flask because it really helps against like lots of small hits, which can happen a lot in Blight because you sometimes stack like hundreds of monsters, and then when they shoot you, right, it's gonna be like lots of small hits. So that is actually pretty beneficial. If I didn't run the Mana Flask, I would also run Basalt Flask to get even more armor, because we already have a decent enough evasion. So now for the gems. For the gems, we're running the Cremation of Exhuming. So this is something you have to either get from trade or from just lab, farming it yourself. I think Cremation has only 1 cremation. Maybe it has 2 cremations. If it has 2, then it's a little bit trickier, but you still can get it very cheap from trade. Let's see, how much is Cremation of Exhuming right now on trade? It's 1 chaos, right? So very, very cheap, underused gem right now. Then we have GMP, very important. The more projectiles we shoot, the more corpses we detonate. Void Manipulation. It has 2 purposes. Number 1 is just boosting our poison damage, right, and our chaos damage from hits that we're doing, but also supported skills deal no elemental damage, and by not dealing elemental damage, we're making sure that if we are hitting a monster that has energy shield, we are keeping that energy shield on them, and that also allows us to deal 10% more chaos damage to them because they still will have the energy shield that we're not going to get rid of, and therefore we're going to be doing more damage to them. Then we have Deadly Ailments and Unbound Ailments. The poison duration is very important. You want as much poison duration as you can. It helps with the proliferation because whenever you proliferate poison with Pathfinder, it doesn't refresh the duration. It just keeps the duration that it had, right? So the longer the duration, the more proliferation you can do. Then we have the Arcanist Brand setup for Despair, Arcane Surge, and a Frostbomb. Arcane Surge just for a little bit of mana regeneration. Frostbomb for monsters that have this annoying regen sometimes, so you can kill them easier because they have like millions and millions of life, and if they have regen or consecrated ground, it would be like impossible to deal with them without huge amount of damage. So Frostbomb just helps with that, and Despair of course to debuff them. I like the setup on Arcanist Brand because you can just drop it, and then as new monsters are coming in, they're just gonna keep getting cursed, right? So that is very, very useful for that. For auras, we have simply a Grace and a Malevolence. So Grace for some evasion, Malevolence for extra damage. I have faster attacks, Whirling Blades, Frostblink for mobility, and then we have faster casting, Spell Cascade, Empower, and Desecrate for our corpses. So Desecrate, ideally you want it in a helmet. There's like a Honor Olm or whatever it's called, like a helmet with +2 to level of socketed gems. If you get that, then you will sacrifice your spell suppression, but you will get immediately like +4, right? Because you'll get the Empower levels and you'll get the Desecrate levels. So that is a very easy way to get very quick levels to your Desecrate. Even if you have like Empower level 1, it will still be bumped up to Empower level 3. But basically that is just for spamming the corpses, and ideally we want it to be level 25 because that will allow us to have the maximum level of the corpses that we can have in Blight Ravaged maps, which is 85. So I'm 1 level below, I could get a Corrupted one level 21, and then I would be at the cap. And also we have Steel Skin, cast when damage taken, and Withering Step. The reason why I'm choosing Steel Skin over other guard skills is because we need something to deal with bleed, right? So this grants immunity to bleeding, and I don't have really any other way of dealing with bleed. Now let's look at the passive tree, which is very, very straightforward, and there is pretty much like one super important thing on it, and that is the fact that we are stacking low tolerance. So you want to get very cheap clusters, just get the base clusters and alt spam them until you get low tolerance on 2 of them, right? So ideally you want 4 passives, so you always have like this short path here, and you want low tolerance here, and then the Poison Mastery, which is basically the same thing. So we're stacking 3 of them. That means that we have a 900% increased damage with the poisons that we inflict on non-poisoned enemies. So the first poison you apply to a monster is going to have 900% increased damage. That means that if you're exploding a monster, right, and it's not, and it hits another mob that is cursed, whatever, or you're gonna poison it, then that poison is gonna have 900% more damage, or 900% increased damage, and that then after it very quickly dies is gonna proliferate, right? So these huge poisons are gonna be the ones proliferating, and it's gonna be proliferating, and of course the strongest poison is always proliferated, so they're gonna keep stacking and get on the boss while they are, you know, the strongest. So that is the reason, right? The low tolerance with the poison proliferation is actually a very, very nice tech together. For the jewels, you want simply like you want some strength, you want some alive, and you want damaging ailments deal damage faster, or you want poison duration, right? So we have poison duration, damaging ailments, and strength, and then we also have here corrupted blood cannot be inflicted on you. That's another thing you need. Definitely for Blight Ravaged maps, get this jewel. Otherwise, like every, I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 Blight Ravaged maps, maybe you'll find a rare with corrupted blood, and then because we're doing so many hits, because of the proliferation and explosion and so on, you're actually gonna fully stack yourself and then not be able to do anything about it, because the monster is gonna stay alive forever, so you're just gonna die to it. You cannot out heal it. It's not possible to out heal the corrupted blood on this character, so you definitely need corrupted blood immunity. For the lab, we are doing basically a very straightforward Nature's Adrenaline first, because we're leveling with Poison's Concoction. Then second, I recommend Master Toxicist for the proliferation. It's just easier, clear. And then third one is the Wither for more damage. We're not going for the Master Surgeon. That would be something that you would do if you go to higher budget version, right? If you actually want to progress this character more, then you would go Master Surgeon, and you could go for something like a Life Flask with also Petrified Blood, right, or whatever the skill is called, and we're just basically overhealing ourselves with a flask at all times, and it's very easy to sustain the flask charges, so it wouldn't be a problem at all. So the tree looks basically like this. It's going to be in the description in the POB, but we're pathing to this corpse cluster for some extra corpses that we can have. We're pathing for this poison, spell suppression, and also caster mastery. The AoE with caster mastery is a tech that I saw the DNB guy that does like Blight videos, I forget the name, but there's one YouTuber who does a lot of videos about this type of a build. He plays Occultist, I think, Occultist Cremation of Exhuming for Blight, and one of the techs he's using is of course the caster mastery in this cluster here that gives you chance to open nearby chests, and that's simply just a Q well that you get later on when you are a bit higher level. You don't get it at the beginning. It's more of a luxury, and then of course important the duration. So getting to this mastery for duration of your ailments is very, very nice, and also elemental overload for just extra damage. And that's basically the setup. That's the character. It's very clunky for mapping, but it is very comfy for just doing Blight. You have to get used a little bit to it because we have like slow cast time, and when there is so much shit happening, I wish GGG fixed Blight Ravaged maps, because the FPS and the performance is absolutely horrible. When a lot of monsters stack, the game is almost unplayable. Sometimes it is literally unplayable. You just have like white flickering flashes of light, the whole thing glitches, the whole UI glitches, and it's just like unplayable mess. But it is what it is. It's still like one of the easiest ways to get early currency, and one of the simplest ways to set yourself up for a good league start. And hopefully you enjoyed the video. You'll find all the links in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.